and welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Fornelli. I'm Chip Patterson coming to you live at youtube.com/cover3 and all across the 24/7 Sports Facebook network. Thanks for hanging out. Smash that subscribe, smash that like, come and join us in the chat. Oh boy, we got a lot to get into. I know. It's just these rankings don't matter as much. This is your meeting of the CFP Anon here on this Tuesday. But I do think there is something to dig into. As we have a changeover at number 1 in the college football playoff rankings, it is Georgia. Ohio State at 2, Michigan at 3, TCU at 4, Tennessee falls to 5, Oregon at 6, LSU all the way up to 7, USC at 8, Alabama at 9, Clemson at 10. Not going to go through the entire top 25. I will say that the notable additions on the back end, where, of course, we know it informs the front end of the college football playoff rankings. Washington breaks in at number 25. Hey, they're playing Oregon this week. Kentucky breaks in at number 24. Hey, they're playing Georgia next week. Florida State breaks in at number 23. That's a team that Clemson beat. UCF is in there at 22. Illinois hangs on at 21. And then Notre Dame Fighting Irish after taking down Clemson all the way up to number 20. So, Tom, where do you want to start? Because if, like Jerry Palm does this better than, almost anybody in the entire country in terms of projecting this. And he, as along with many others, were thinking that Tennessee was, going to be ahead of TCU. And yet the selection committee puts TCU ahead of Tennessee after that loss. I just got off CBS Sports HQ. I have not heard, actually, they haven't even had the committee chair on. So forget whatever the people on the TV show said. What do you make of TCU getting the 4 ahead of Tennessee at 5?
I'm happy about it. I was a little surprised by it. I thought that after TCU played another, kind of close-ish game in which they did not dominate a team, I thought that Tennessee, who only has the one loss and was at number 1 last week, who lost, to Georgia, which is the new number 1 team, I thought there was a realistic shot that they would keep them in the top 4, but I'm happy because clearly, well, I don't want to say happy, but I think that what they did was they clearly didn't really care about the final score as much as they cared about the way that game went. And if you go by the old game control metric, clearly Georgia
there was no game control.
Yeah. Georgia was in control of that game. And I also think that if you look at it from another angle, if they leave Tennessee at number 4 this week and say they put TCU at number 5, and Tennessee doesn't lose, how do you justify moving them out of the top 4 going forward? Is suddenly beating Texas enough to put TCU ahead of Tennessee? What if it's another close win? So I feel like it this way, what they're doing, they're like, listen, well, if they win out, they're going to stay in the top 4. But if they lose, they've got some games against Texas on the road and Baylor on the road are their next 2 games. We can bump them out and get somebody else in their place.
So my thought on Tennessee is that with wins against Alabama and LSU, teams that I thought were maybe going to be in the top 10 and certainly are in the top 10, that Tennessee was going to have a leg up because TCU's schedule got weaker this week. Kansas State took a loss. Oklahoma State took a loss and fell all the way out of the college football playoffs top 25 rankings. But here we go. TCU gets in ahead of Tennessee. And to your point, I think that Tennessee, there's always a difference in rankings between dropping and getting jumped. Tennessee does not have any quality opponents left on its remainder schedule. It will be heavy favorites, and there is no amount of margin of victory or anything that it can do against the opponents that Tennessee has left. They should win out as best they can, be 11-1, give yourself the best chance, and root for chaos on Conference Championship Saturday. That is still the case right now. TCU, you mentioned that they are underdogs by a touchdown at Texas, a game that we discussed earlier on the Cover 3 podcast. They also have that road game at Baylor. This is it feels like the season, or at least the college football playoff hopes for the Horned Frogs might be on the line this weekend in Austin.
Yeah, it's a huge game. They have to win the game. Obviously, I think that TCU is in that position where they have to win out to stay in. I don't think they're going to get the same respect with a loss unless it's a close kind of overtime loss to Texas and then Texas wins out and then they get vengeance on Texas in the Big 12 championship game. I feel like the Horned Frogs are in a position where, fair or not, the way the committee's been looking at them, they have to win out.
The Clemson Tigers finished 2 spots higher than they were in the AP poll. They only fall to number 10. They were number 12 in the AP poll. Do you think this was a fair treatment of Clemson after the result against Notre Dame?
No, because I didn't think Clemson deserved to be number 4 in the first place. So for them to still be hanging out in the top 10, it's like, look at Clemson's resume. What has it done?
So it got weaker because it lost Wake Forest and Syracuse, but you add Florida State back into the mix and the increased respect for Notre Dame. Tag it on your bingo card, folks. See, quality loss.
That's what I want to discuss more than Clemson. Because Notre Dame, a team with losses to Stanford and Marshall, plus the season opening loss to Ohio State, which quality loss. But with losses to Stanford and Marshall, a team that has lost a third of its games gets to not only jump into the rankings, but gets to jump to number 20.
So if the team sheets, which were based on last week's rankings, Notre Dame's team sheet for this week when the committee got together said it was 3-1 versus teams in the last CFB rankings. Cool. Syracuse dropped out, which obviously changes the math on that from 3-1 to 2-1. But of 3 lost teams, nobody else is anywhere close to that. And that's why I think you saw them jump to the front of the line. I mean, heck,
do those other 3 lost teams have losses to Marshall and Stanford?
They do not. In fact, most of them are the quality loss kings, like Kentucky.
So what in the hell has Notre Dame done to be like, even if I'll glance past them being ahead of Illinois.
You don't think that the injury issues at quarterback were part of the discussion?
He's still the quarterback, is he not?
But just the idea that at the beginning of the season,
wasn't he the quarterback in those games?
Well, like, you lose Tyler Buckner. There's a little bit of an adjustment period. It does not explain the Stanford loss, but I do think it explains the Marshall loss.
Nothing explains the Marshall loss, Chip. You're Notre Dame. If you're a top 20 team, you're not losing to Marshall.
Facts.
I mean, I would take, like, again, I will ignore the Illinois thing because I can understand it even if I think it's horse crap. I'll understand UCF, they're not a Power 5 team, so they're just not going to get that same kind of respect. But if you compare Notre Dame's resume to like Florida State's, like, I don't see a loss to Marshall on there. I don't see a loss to Stanford. I see a loss to Wake. I see a loss to a ranked NC State team, which the committee seems to still hold in high regard because they are currently at 16, despite being the backup quarterback, Chip. They've somehow kept winning. They didn't lose to Marshall. They didn't lose to Stanford.
I've always said Notre Dame could learn something from NC State football. I have always said that here on the Cover 3 podcast.
There is no reason for Notre Dame to be at number 20 other than to prop up Clemson, to keep it in the top 10. Because they want to give Clemson a chance to get back in. If there's enough chaos in front of Clemson from 5 to 9, or with TCU losing, because you look, there's the Pac-12 teams in there. Although again, UCLA being ranked behind Clemson, come on. But if there's enough chaos with Oregon, USC, LSU can't get in. They're a 2-loss team. They're never going to get in. Tennessee, they're not getting in. A 2-loss team's not getting in unless there are multiple 2-loss conference champions. I don't care.
I'm not. Maybe that might happen. If LSU beats,
is Georgia losing twice?
Listen, if LSU beats Georgia in Atlanta and they sit again, yes, like whoever wins the SEC West earns the honor of getting pasted by Georgia. This is what I have decided.
Don't do it, Chip. Do not do it. Do not fall for the propaganda.
It's not propaganda.
It's propaganda. SEC propaganda has put in your head that a 2-loss SEC champion can still get in. Don't fall for it. It won't happen unless there are 3 other 2-loss Power 5 champions.
Look, LSU's remaining schedule has a combined record of 12-13, but I still think it would be impressive to go on the road against 2 division opponents and get wins and take care of business against a UAB team with a pulse in the final home game of the season. If they do those 3 things and then go and beat Georgia, then I think that this is an incredibly impressive team with, 1 really bad loss to Tennessee, but then a season opening loss with the first game with a transfer quarterback and a first-year head coach on a blocked extra point. I think
brain is poisoned. Your brain is poisoned by all the years of propaganda.
Up swimming in the Neuse River. That has nothing to do
that have taught you that losses to good SEC teams are better than wins against anybody. That's what your brain is telling you.
I think that the accomplishments and the wins that LSU would have put together over the back half of the season, including in this scenario, beating Georgia, which I don't think is going to happen.
All right, well, let me ask you this. What is LSU's best win?
Currently, let's see. I can tell you, Tom. Currently, LSU's best win is Alabama. LSU's second best
two-loss
win,
Alabama.
No, you call it 2-loss Alabama. I call it number 9 Alabama.
The 2-loss team is its best win.
LSU.
If you want to argue that Ole Miss is its best win, okay, but then Ole Miss has to beat Alabama this weekend, because if Ole Miss beats Alabama, then Alabama's a 3-loss team. That's no longer a very impressive win. Will Ole Miss be an impressive win? It should be if they're 9-1, but how will the committee look at it? I don't know. The point is, a 2-loss team is not getting into the playoff unless there are other 2-loss Power 5 champions. It's not happening. And looking around, I mean, this is all, we're wasting our breath because they're not beating Georgia.
Right.
If Georgia can do that to Tennessee,
yeah,
the Tennessee team that beat LSU by like 27, what's it going to do to LSU?
Right. My point is, we tried to come up with all these rules, like 2 SEC teams would make the BCS or 2 SEC teams would make the college football playoff. I'm just not going to rule it out, especially when we've got as many malleable tools going on, and college football has proved chaotic. But I do think that LSU, with wins of you call it 2-loss Alabama, and that's fair, and you're gaming out the Alabama.
That's what it is. What does it matter? That's what it is. It has 2 losses.
But in the eyes of the committee, they are currently the 9th best team in the country, and Ole Miss is currently the 11th best team in the country, and LSU has wins over both of them.
Mm-hmm. But it's a 2-loss team. Its best win has lost twice.
Oh, and by the way, I'm probably taking Arkansas.
Yes. Oh, yeah. We talked about that on the show on Monday. Yeah. That no team has ever been more ripe to be upset, and no team has ever been more ripe to pull off the upset.
Oh, and look, and Arkansas is so hurt. I mean, there's nothing in common sense. Like, all of the model nerds are going to tell me I'm crazy for that one, but just like, and look, I might take a loss, but all vibes here. There ain't no way that you're going into Fayetteville against the Arkansas team that is just like limping to the finish line of this season and feeling like you're going to get in and out of there without some pain.
Can't measure vibes, Chip. Can't measure vibes. You can measure like waves, but you can't measure vibes.
You can measure waves. That is true. Very good point.
Thank you.
Michigan up to number 3. Did you think that there was any chance that like Ohio State was always going to be propped up, especially now that the Notre Dame win means more? How does the Michigan future look to you?
I think it's interesting that now that there are 2 Big Ten teams in the top 4, you use the phrase "it means more." Michigan. I mean, they beat Rutgers 52-17. If you look at, we've been arguing resumes, I got to do the same thing with Michigan here. What Michigan's best win is Penn State. Other than that, there really isn't a very impressive win on the resume. But you can make the same argument about TCU, who now only has 1 really good win. Although I would say TCU's overall stack of wins is more impressive. If you look at their top 4 wins versus Michigan's top 4 wins, I would say TCU's is better. The difference is Michigan, I think, has been more impressive in its wins. But I would probably have them at 4, but I don't think they wanted to bump TCU up to 3. And they also understand that with Michigan and Ohio State having to play in a few weeks, they're going to bump the loser down anyway. So they just probably save themselves a little bit of a headache there.
So the team sheets include a lot of statistics as we've talked about, and Boo Corrigan has already talked about balance. And one of the things that's on there is yards per play and yards per play allowed. Of the teams that are within the college football playoff top 25 and sort of currently in the mix for some of these top spots, there are only 3 teams that can actually boast true balance in having a top 25 offense and also a top 25 defense and yards per play allowed. They are Michigan, Ohio State, and Georgia. What Michigan and Ohio State are making up for without having the kind of resume or quality wins is numbers on a sheet, which do back up what our eyes tell us, which is that they are very complete and balanced teams. And as long as Michigan keeps running the daggum ball with Blake Corum and playing suffocating defense, then it is going to find itself in position to go into Columbus with a chance to play its way into the college football playoff.
Yeah, like the one thing that the rankings and the nerds and all the basic stats and everything all agree on is, even if you look at the nerd stats and you correct them for the quality of competition that teams have faced, which they can do and they do. Don't explain to me how, but they do. Michigan, Ohio State, and Georgia are routinely like up in the, if you look at the graph, they're in the very top right, which is where the good teams usually are. And they're very far away typically from everybody else. So if you look at those advanced stats, if you just look at the yards per play stats that Boo Corrigan used, or you just look at the overall records, it makes sense. But again, if you want to include resumes, I think because of that, TCU is a little more deserving.
Coming up on the other side, we continue to look at where the movement could be throughout the Pac-12. Who emerges from that conference? Do they have a shot at the college football playoff? And the Group of 5 race gets very interesting this weekend. All that and more next.
I kept my mouth shut for 25 years.
Now that you're back, I want you to go to Tulsa.
Not exactly the welcome I was expecting. What crew runs this neighborhood?
No crew up in here in the middle of nowhere.
I'll protect you from the gangs.
What gangs?
Sit down!
You got a pretty good appetite for someone who was just shot at.
Tulsa King. New series streaming November 13th, exclusively on Paramount Plus.
So currently the highest ranked Group of 5 team is the Tulane Green Wave at number 17, 8-1. They've got a head-to-head win against Kansas State, which is proving very valuable. Kansas State currently at number 19, hanging on after taking a loss over the weekend to the Texas Longhorns. UCF is at 7-2. They are playing in New Orleans this weekend. No other teams from the Group of 5 within the college football playoff top 25. So apologies to Coastal Carolina, which while 8-1 has a strength of schedule ranking of 128, probably harming the Chanticleers right there. No love for Liberty, which at 8-1 has a strength of schedule of 106.
Mm-hmm.
Is this are we going to see the college football, the New Year's Six representative come from the American Athletic Conference?
It certainly looks that way. I mean, just based on the rankings, it's hard to imagine, like UCF or Tulane. May the best team win.
And then keep it rolling. Tulane would still has Cincinnati on the future schedule, still has SMU on the future schedule. SMU a little bit, UCF, excuse me, slightly more manageable. But again, they are 5 spots behind Tulane and currently sitting with 1 more loss. Anything stand out from that back half of the rankings or the middle to you?
I am surprised. I'm not surprised, but I am surprised by how much they do seem to like NC State. I just think if it's a good team, I like it, but I'm trying to figure out what the stat is that is propping them up over a couple of other teams, considering they don't seem to mind putting other 3-loss teams ahead of other 2-loss teams like Washington, UCF, and Illinois. I'm wondering why a 2-loss NC State not only gets to be ahead of those 3-loss teams, but have such a buffer.
I mean, they do not have a good offense.
No.
So, I mean, statistically, and our eyes can tell us that. MJ Morris has done a great job of being able to provide a spark. But, I mean, we're still talking about like a team that even with MJ Morris has not been piling on the points. They've just been scoring enough to win and letting their defense, which, again, I think is fantastic, one of the best linebacking cores in the entire country. I think that it's got to come down to the fact that within the NC State resume, the Florida State win now means a lot more. The Wake Forest win, like if I was to imagine that they did a top 30 or a top 35, Wake Forest is almost certainly somewhere between 25 and 30. And then losses at Clemson, at Syracuse. I think Syracuse, again, would be a team that would probably come in the top 35 if they were to extend this all the way out. I don't know.
Yeah, it's again, I like them. I don't. It's hard. I'm not like trying to be like I'm upset that they're ranked 16th. It's kind of weird to me based on what we're seeing them do everywhere else. Where it's like, why are the Wolfpack so respected? Because of a 2-point win over Florida State, apparently. So a 2-point win over the number 23 team can get you the 16th spot. Cool.
So when I was putting together all the profiles in preparation for tonight, I did find that there's a hard line after Penn State.
Yeah.
Like that seems to be the dividing line has moved, but right now it seems like Penn State, which in terms of like quality wins doesn't have them. You know, there it's like Minnesota at Purdue, at Auburn, at Indiana, Northwestern. I just got to Northwestern way too quickly when I was listing the best wins on Penn State's resume, but the only losses are to top 3 teams. Strength of schedule is number 11 in the country. The eye test says that they are a very good football team. It's just that they're a 2-loss team that has lost to the better teams and beaten up on all the worst teams. And I think that that's kind of the line where we say, all right, Penn State is kind of the edge of that top tier. You know, if we were to divide this whole thing in half, after that, it's like North Carolina, sure, they only have 1 loss. Their best win is against Pitt. Their second best win is at Duke, but they've only got 1 loss. And then from there, I think that it's a little bit softer within the rest of those rankings.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you on that. Can I go after one thing we talked about last week that got even worse this week?
Sure.
USC is 8-1. It has not beaten a single team ranked in the top 25 of this week's college football playoff rankings.
Bye-bye Oregon State. So sorry to see you go.
Mm-hmm. Its best win is probably Oregon State, which was a 3-point win.
I agree.
In the last 2 weeks, it beat Arizona, a team that is 3-6, by 8 points. On Saturday night, it beat Cal, a team that is 3-6, by 6 points. So that team is currently ranked at number 8, 4 spots ahead of a UCLA team that has 2 wins over 2 teams ranked currently right now. Utah, which is at number 16, Washington at number 25. Its lone loss is a 15-point win or loss to Oregon, which is currently in the top 6. Its other wins have all been by 2 scores or more, except for the South Alabama game early in the season, which was kind of a crazy game. They won 32-31. Probably got caught looking ahead to that one. Why is UCLA getting so disrespected by the committee compared to USC, which gets to be in the top 10 with a nothing resume, struggling to beat bad teams? But UCLA, who beats up on the bad teams, because that South Alabama game, it was a 1-point win, but go watch the Sun Belt. South Alabama is one of the best teams in the Sun Belt. It's a pretty decent team. It's a decent group of 5 team and has 2 top 25 wins, is at number 12. Explain that to me somehow. Give me something.
They should not be that far apart.
UCLA should be ahead of USC. It's not even a thing of being far apart. They should be ahead of them.
Especially now that Washington has cycled in. That's
there's no explanation. And we're doing the show, so obviously we can't pay attention. I'm hoping somebody asks Spook Oregon this, because I would love to hear the explanation behind it.
Oh, my guess would be that it is like, well, was it really a loss if you lost on a 2-point conversion on the road in Salt Lake City?
Yes.
Yes.
Still counts,
it was still a loss. Yeah. No, UCLA's got better wins. Without a doubt.
Better wins. Slightly worse loss. Yeah. But again, both, like, they lost to the number 6 team by 15. USC lost to the number 16 team by 1. But it hasn't beaten anybody. Its best win is a 3-point win over Oregon State. It can't pull away from bad teams. Its defense is atrocious. If they don't force turnovers, they can't stop you.
So I was trying to think about, the bad numbers on the sheet this week. And so I was like looking for like, what are the ones that are going to stand out? And USC's defense, number 108 in the country in yards per play.
Yeah. Yeah. But apparently that stat doesn't matter anymore. It matters for determining the top 3. But once you get outside of that, well, the yards per play doesn't matter anymore.
So what's the difference between USC, a team that has a defense outside of the top 100, a very good offense, an 8-1 record, and no top 25 wins against the current CFP, and the North Carolina Tar Heels, a team with a defense outside of the top 100 and a very good offense, and no wins against the current top 100, against the current top 25.
You know what the difference is? And let's be real. The difference is one of the teams is coached by Lincoln Riley and is USC. That's it. That is the only difference between USC, UCLA, and North Carolina that is mattering in these rankings. It's sexy. And the people in that room are just as dumb as the rest of us. They see, ooh, USC. That's a good team. They score a lot of points. They give up just as many, but they score a lot of them.
I I gave you stats and facts when you pushed on this last week, and I'm not gonna. But I wasn't trying to fight you.
No, you were trying to come up with their thought process.
Right, exactly. And at this point, with Oregon State, because Oregon State played Washington, the river in the sky. Now, it wasn't a river, but it was a whole lot of wind. We didn't get our river, but we did get our under. But it was like that game was the USC UCLA resume game. And guess what? Washington won. UCLA should not be that many spots behind USC. I totally agree with you on that.
It should be behind USC. Say it correctly. It should be it should be ahead of USC.
UCLA should be ahead of USC.
And you know what? North Carolina has a case to be ahead of USC as well.
God, there's the clip right there. And we just go back and we put the facts, and then that's how you make social media gold. All right, Texas we mentioned TCU earlier. Texas falls at number 18, 6-3 overall. So somebody in the chat earlier, when I was talking about Kentucky being a quality loss king, they're like, no, actually Alabama's the quality loss king with losses to Tennessee and LSU. But they do have one quality win, with that coming to the Texas Longhorns. So when you look at Texas, they've got the win at Kansas State. But after that, not a whole lot. The losses, Oklahoma State's not going to carry as much value as it did. Texas Tech's not going to carry as much value as it did. Strength of schedule ranking, though, very good, as you might expect, given playing in the Big 12 and Alabama in the non-conference. And when you look at offense and defense, statistically pretty balanced team. 3-loss team is not going to make the college football playoff, but there are other things to play for some of these teams in the middle rankings. Could you see Texas going on a little run here at the end of the season and showing up in the New Year's Six?
Yeah, for sure. Because I do think, obviously this week's game against TCU is huge. But I also think, the advanced metrics love Texas. So maybe some of the numbers that go into those have made their way into the selection committee room when it comes to ranking these teams. And that's why Texas is getting as much respect as it is, considering the lack of a general overwhelmingly positive resume.
I mean, they're the highest ranked 3-loss team in the country.
Yeah. But if they win out, they'll have beaten TCU. They'll have beaten a Kansas team that might be back to being pretty okay now that Jalen Daniels is back. And they'll have beaten Baylor, a team that is also 6-3. So those are 3 good teams remaining on the schedule. So if they beat those, they might not be put them in the top 10 resume wins, but they'd be 9-3. They'll be playing for a Big 12 championship. And if they win the Big 12 championship, of course, they'll be in a New Year's Six. Now, will they get in if they lose the Big 12 championship? I don't know.
All right. Anything else before we get out of here? Tennessee is your top ranked 1-loss team at number 5, followed by Oregon at number 6. LSU is your top ranked 2-loss team at number 7, followed by Alabama at 9. Then Utah down at 13. Just mentioned Texas is your top ranked 3-loss team, followed by Kansas State at 19, Notre Dame at 20. Anything else from the rankings that stands out to you?
I'm going to harp on it the same way we've talked about it many times. Kentucky being ranked is just wild to me.
It's sweet. I mean, it was either going to be Kentucky or Mississippi State. They were both hanging out there with 3 losses, being in the SEC. Honestly, Kentucky just has the win against Mississippi State. Because otherwise, that would be Mississippi State. Mississippi State's other losses are to LSU and Alabama, both on the road. You can honestly defend those. They're both top 10 teams. But Kentucky has a loss against South Carolina. Cannot defend that. But they got a win against Mississippi State. And I guess that is good enough.
It's just, you can't find another decent 2-loss team or just a strong group of 5 team. You couldn't have just tossed Liberty a bone and given them 25 and you had to rank Kentucky. It was just something that you felt you needed to do.
The teams I had on the cut line that did not make it, Liberty was the one that I sort of had highest in the pecking order. But like I mentioned earlier, strength of schedule 106, best win at Arkansas, which they just had, is fantastic. Loss by 1 point at Wake Forest. Coastal Carolina, strength of schedule 128, but the best win is what? Georgia State, App State, Georgia Southern, Marshall Army, go down the line right there. Wake Forest does have wins against Florida State and the aforementioned Liberty Flames. Oklahoma State was probably going to be done. I was looking, their offense defense splits are bad. Like statistically, the Cowboys are kind of letting go of the rope a little bit. I had Kentucky down in the pecking order. Cincinnati at 7-2, but the best wins at SMU and then Indiana. Yeesh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Syracuse probably wasn't going to hold on, even though they've got a win against NC State. So had to be Kentucky.
Had to be, I guess.
It had to be Kentucky. All right, we will be back on Wednesday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. I hope you got your mailbag questions in, because the way that the mailbag works, sometimes it takes a while for the questions to hit the page, and so we'll throw them in for next week. If you want to get them in right now, throw them in, and we will tackle them in a future mailbag episode. Maybe even throw them into the instant reaction show, but we'll be diving into that. Remember, leave a 5-star review, put your question in that review. We will get to it in a future mailbag episode. And you can follow him on Twitter at Tom Fernelli. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Tom, thank you very much.
Thank you.